Hello everyone, this is Story Hunter. Some time ago I made a video where I decided to reread the book The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring with you. In the last video I made the first part, and today I will continue reading the second part of the book. Write what you think about this in the comments. Let's plunge into the world of Middle-earth. 2. About the pipe potion. Speaking of the old days of hobbits, it is necessary to mention one amazing habit that these people acquired long ago and firmly. They, with the help of pipes made of wood or clay, inhale and exhale the smoke from the smoldering dried leaves of a plant known as pipe potion, or simply leaves. It looks like some kind of tobacco. The origin of the custom, or, as the hobbits themselves say, the art of smoking, can no longer be established. Everything that was known on this subject was collected and brought together by Meriadoc Brandiscock in the treatise The Herbalist of the Shire. Both tobacco and Meriadoc come from southern Chetty, and both are mentioned in our story, so it's worth paying attention to the introduction to the herbalist. This art, writes the venerable Meriadoc, we can safely consider to be our own invention. It is difficult to say when smoke first came out of the hobbits' mouths and nostrils. Tobacco is mentioned in all legends and family stories. Over many centuries, many different herbs have been tried as pipe fillings, both pungent and sweet in taste. But all the chronicles give primacy in the cultivation of real pipe potion to Tobold Dudkins from the Long Valley in South Chetty, and this was in the days of Isengrim II, about 1070 according to the account of the Shire. Since then, all the best varieties have come from there: Long Valley Leaf, Old Toby, and Southern Star. No one knows how Old Toby found tobacco, and he himself did not tell anyone about it until his last day. He traveled a little, hardly went further than Brill, but he knew everything about herbs. It is quite possible that it was in Brill that Toby learned about tobacco. In any case, now it grows there on any southern slope. Of course, the Brill hobbits consider themselves the first smokers, but if you listen to them, they are ahead of the Shire in everything. Although they seem to be right about tobacco, it is also true that the pipe potion came to the dwarves through Brill, and then other peoples got involved, pathfinders, mages, and others, who still walk back and forth through the ancient crossroads. Thus, the center of this art is reliably determined, the Frisky Pony Tavern, which has been maintained by the Masalutic family since time immemorial. However, I had to travel south more than once, and I came to the conclusion that tobacco did not always grow in the lands of the Shire. He came to our north from the lower reaches of the Anduin, and got there at one time from across the sea along with the people of the west. In Gondor, there is as much of it as you like. There it is taller and thicker. It is bred for the smell of flowers. In the centuries since Elendil's time, tobacco had traveled north along the Greenway and settled in warm, sheltered places like the Long Vale. But even though they started growing tobacco in Gondor a little earlier, the hobbits were the first to figure out how to fill their pipes with it. Magicians, too, adopted the art of smoking from us. True, one of my acquaintances, a magician, claimed that he had mastered this art a long time ago, and you can believe it. He smokes just as well as he does everything else. 3. Shire device. The Shire consists of 4 quarters, or Chedi, northern, southern, eastern, and western. Each of them contains, in turn, many regions, settlements, and towns, most often bearing the names of clans that once lived on these lands. Almost all Tooks lived or live in their Tookgors, but this cannot be said about Sumniks or Umniks. The eastern and western outskirts constituted separate regions not included in Chetty. Zaskochi and West Crome became part of the Shire in 1462. At that time there was no government in the Shire. Each clan went about its own business, which basically boiled down to growing and then eating food, and these things took up almost all the time. The inhabitants of the Shire did not suffer from stinginess. They made do with what they had, and did not go out of their way for the sake of wealth. This is probably why small farms, small workshops, and shops remained unchanged throughout the memory of many generations of the inhabitants of the Shire. The memory of princely power in Fornost still lived among the people, although the prince had been gone for almost 1,000 years, and the ruins of Fornost, or Severina, as the hobbits called it, had long been overgrown with lush grasses. Feeling themselves living in a real state, hobbits treat with disdain all sorts of wild peoples and other creatures, like trolls, who live without a king in their head. They attribute all their time-tested rules, as hobbits call the few laws by which the Shire lives, to the prince and strictly observe them. From time immemorial, the Took family has stood out among the noble hobbit families. 300 years ago, the Mace of Tana passed to him from the Staroscox, and since then, each new elder of the Tooks has invariably accepted this title. He convened gatherings and was considered the commander of the Shire Squad and the Hobbit Militia, but the need for them had not arisen for so long that the dance gradually turned into simply an honorary title. Respect for the Tooks was brought by more significant things: their numbers, wealth, and a number of outstanding relatives who had equal strength of character and a penchant for adventure. True, they didn't like any adventures in the Shire. They were a complete hassle. But the Tooks were forgiven, and the elder Tooks were called nothing more than their full name, in fact, rarely used in the Shire, with the addition of a numeral if necessary. For example, Isengrim II. At that time, which will be discussed, the only representative of the authorities was the mayor of Mikurit and the entire Shire. He was elected at the free fair in Belye-Uvali, held every 7 years in the middle of summer. The mayor's primary and almost only duty was to attend feasts on the occasion of holidays, and there was never a shortage of them. At the same time, the mayor acted as postmaster and first sheriff, something like the chief of police. But if the postal service still required some trouble, literate hobbits endlessly wrote to their relatives, friends, and acquaintances who lived more than an afternoon and a half walk away. Then the sheriffs simply had nothing to do. The only sign of uniform for them was a feather on their hat, and police functions were limited to searching for stray cattle and investigations due to poisoning, for which the same cattle were to blame. 12 sheriffs were enough for the entire deanery council, 3 for each chapter. More of them were needed at the borders. There they, as they say, hang around. They looked after all sorts of neighborhoods, large and small, so that they would not bother. Just when this story began, a great many people dispersed around the area. Messages and complaints poured in about all sorts of reasonable and unreasonable strangers who had flooded the borderlands. And this is the first sign of trouble. Everything is not as it should be, and as it has always been. True, most hobbits didn't even pay attention. Even Bilbo didn't think about what these events promised. 60 years have passed since he returned from the journey. Even by hobbit standards, his age was considered very advanced, because hardly half of the hobbits celebrate their centenary. But be that as it may, Bilbo lived, and it should be noted he lived comfortably. Apparently, there was still some left of the wealth acquired in his travels. What he brought, what he spent, and how much was left. He did not tell anyone about that, not even his beloved nephew Frodo, and he still kept the found ring a secret. E4. History of the discovery of the ring, The Hobbit, tells how one fine day the mighty mage Gandalf the Grey appeared at Bilbo's door, and with him 13 dwarves, namely Thorin Oakenshield himself, a dwarf of the royal family in exile, and his comrades. And in this company, Bilbo, to his considerable surprise, on the April morning of 1341, according to the Shire account, set off on a journey to obtain the treasures of the Undermountain kings, which the dwarves had lost somewhere near Erebor. The enterprise was completed successfully. The dragon and the treasure were captured. But although many feats were accomplished and Thorin fell in the Battle of the Five Armies, in the long chronicles of the Third Age these great events would have occupied only a few lines, if not for an accident along the way. In the Misty Mountains, orcs attacked the travelers, and Bilbo, who was left behind, became lost in the labyrinths of the mountains. There in the darkness, he fumbled for a ring on the stones and put it in his pocket. Then the find seemed to him just a little luck. In search of a way out, Bilbo descended deeper and deeper to the roots of the mountains until he finally wandered into a dead end. There was no further progress. Here, forever hidden from all light, lay an eternally calm lake, in the middle of which lived Gollum, a small, disgusting creature on the island. In a tiny boat, more like a trough, rowing with wide paws, staring into the darkness with huge, pale, shimmering eyes. He wandered around the lake, caught fish that were blind from birth and devoured them alive. However, he was not picky. He managed to catch an orc without much trouble. And an orc was good. Gollum owned the treasure. A long time ago, when he was still living in the world, he came into possession of a ring, a golden ring that made its owner invisible. Gollum never loved anything, anyone as much as he loved this strange decoration. He called the ring "my precious" and talked to it, even if he didn't wear it with him. When he didn't have to hunt or track down orcs, he kept his treasure in a secluded hole on an island. If he had the ring with him, he would not hesitate to attack Bilbo as soon as he met him. But it was at that moment that Gollum did not have the ring, but the hobbit was clutching a sharp elven blade in his hand. In an effort to gain time and divert attention, Gollum invited Bilbo to play riddles, betting on the promise of showing the way to the exit against the life of the hobbit, who, if he lost, had to go to Gollum's dinner. Bilbo had no choice. He was completely lost and had absolutely no idea where to go. I had to agree. They asked each other many riddles, and in the end, Bilbo was lucky. Painfully coming up with another riddle, he felt an unfamiliar object in his pocket and mechanically exclaimed, "What is this in my pocket?" And Gollum, mistaking the question for a riddle, could not guess 3 times. The masters of the ancient game disagree on whether such a question can be considered a riddle, but everyone agrees that if Gollum began to answer and answered 3 times, everything was fair, and a loss required payment. Bilbo insisted on fulfilling the conditions, but secretly suspected a trick on the part of the slippery creature, although promises made in such conditions were sacredly observed at all times and among all peoples, and only the most evil ones risked breaking them. However, Gollum became just such an evil man over the many years spent in darkness, alone with the ring. He planned a black betrayal, left Bilbo, and rushed to his island for the ring. He was pretty hungry, angry because of the loss, and if his charm were with him, he would have broken the hobbit's neck without looking at the weapon. But there was no ring on the island. Gollum lost it. It's gone. The terrible squeal of Gollum, who discovered the loss, made Bilbo's hair stand on end, although he, of course, did not understand what was happening. But Gollum, albeit belatedly, found the answer to the riddle. "What's in his pockets?" he hissed, and his pale eyes glowed with a green flame in the darkness. One desire was easily read in them: to return, immediately finish off the hobbit, and find your charm. Bilbo barely had time to notice the danger and rushed away from the water. He was lucky again. As he ran, he put his hand in his pocket and the ring seemed to slide onto his finger. Gollum rushed past without noticing the hobbit. He hurried to the exit so as not to miss the thief. Bilbo followed him carefully. Gollum whined as he walked, swore, complained, and lamented, endlessly remembering his treasure. Gradually, Bilbo realized something, and hope dawned before him. Since he was lucky enough to find a real magic ring, it means he had a chance to escape both Gollum and the orcs. Gollum led the hobbit to an inconspicuous hole at the foot of the eastern slope, and lay down across the exit, sniffing and listening. Bilbo almost succumbed to the temptation to use the sword, but pity stopped his hand. The situation was unequal. He had both a ring and a sword, and Gollum had nothing. Therefore, gathering his courage, he simply jumped over Gollum and rushed to the exit, pursued by heart-rending cries, "Thief! Thief Sumnix! We hate him forever!" It is curious that, having met with his companions, Bilbo described the events not exactly as they happened. It turns out that if he lost, Gollum promised him a gift, but when, having actually lost, he went to the island to get it, a magic ring he had received on his birthday, on the island, it turned out that there was no ring. Of course, because Bilbo had found this same ring earlier, and now he had won it, so the ring rightfully belonged to the hobbit. But since Gollum did not keep his promise, Bilbo demanded to be shown the way to the exit, and so got out. The same version was written down in Bilbo's memories. He himself believed in it so much that even the Council of Elrond did not make him doubt it. Naturally, in this form, the story ended up in the Scarlet Book and in many lists from it. But some chronicles contain a true account of events, and they come, of course, either from Frodo or from Sammius. They knew the truth, although they did not change Bilbo's own notes. While Gandalf, for example, did not believe the story told by Bilbo at all, he became very interested in the ring and eventually extracted from Bilbo the true account of events. For some time, this even seriously disrupted their friendly relations, but the magician believed that the truth was more valuable. Gandalf was first of all alarmed by the senseless lies, which were not at all typical of hobbits. Obviously, Bilbo started talking about the gift at the suggestion of Gollum. He also endlessly talked about the birthday present. The magician began to think, but a lot of time passed until all the details of this story became clear, even in his smartest head. There is almost nothing to say about Bilbo's further adventures. The ring helped him escape from the orcs. He continued to use it to help his friends in difficult times, but did not show it to anyone. Upon returning home, he spoke about the ring only with Gandalf and Frodo and was sure that in the whole Shire no one except them suspected of its existence. And he told the story of his journey only to Frodo. Bilbo hung his trusty hornet sword over the fireplace, and the priceless chainmail from the dragon's treasury, donated by the dwarves, was provided by Matam to the house in Mickereet. But the old cloak with a hood lay in the chest of drawers at home, and the ring on an elegant chain was always in the hobbit's pocket. Bilbo returned home on June 22, 1342, in his 52nd year, and from then on, nothing noteworthy happened in the Shire until the day when Mr. Sumnix began to prepare for the celebration of his 111th birthday in the year 1401, according to the account of the Shire. From this moment, our story begins. V. About the Chronicles of the Shire. The role played by the hobbits in the great events of the end of the Third Age awakened in them an interest in their own history. The Shire became part of the reunited kingdom. On this occasion, oral traditions were collected and written down, giving rise to the Chronicles of the Shire. Some noble hobbits were involved in great things, and many families now diligently studied ancient stories and legends. At the end of the 1st century of the Fourth Age, there were already many libraries in the Shire, containing many historical works and chronicles. Among them, the storage facilities in Nedovishki, Smilishchi, and Brendanory differed. Our story about the end of the Third Age is borrowed mainly from the Scarlet Book of Western Chrome, kept in Nedovishki, in the House of the Enchanted, the hereditary watchers of Western. Presumably this is Bilbo's original personal diary, which was with him in Dolna. Frodo returned it to the Shire, significantly expanded it, and in 1420-1421 he completed the history of the war. She compiled a separate volume which was kept along with 3 others, bound in red leather, given by the uncle to his nephew upon parting. Later, a 5th volume was added to these 4 volumes with commentary, genealogy, and other materials relating to the hobbits, members of the Fellowship of the Ring. The original Scarlet Book has not survived, but Sammius's descendants made several copies of it, most from the 1st volume. The most remarkable of these copies has its own history. Kept in Smilishchi, it was nevertheless written in Gondor, perhaps at the insistence of Peregrine's grandson, and completed in 1592 according to the account of the Shire, or in the year 172 of the Fourth Age. The southern list ends with the words, Findegil, the royal scribe, completed this work in 172 and shows an exact agreement with the Book of Thane in Minas Tirith, which is an exact copy of the Scarlet Book of the Perionates, made at the behest of King Elisar. The Scarlet Book of the Perionates was given to King Elisar by Thane Peregrine on the day of his return to Gondor in the year 64. Judging by this inscription, the Book of Thane is the most complete copy of the Scarlet Book. In Minas Tirith it was carefully corrected, especially regarding the elven names and titles, supplemented by a brief summary of the tale of Aragorn and Arwen, which is not directly related to the war. As it was established, the complete history belongs to the pen of Barahir, the grandson of ruler Faramir, and was written down shortly after the departure of the king. But the most important thing about Findegil's copy is Bilbo's unique translations from the Elvish. All 3 volumes are executed with the greatest care and skill. Working in Dolna from 1403 to 1418, Bilbo turned to the rarest sources. He not only worked with the Chronicles, but also spoke with those who remembered the beginning of Elven history. The translations are about the Elder Days, so Frodo did not include them in his version, and they are not given here. Not everything that the Tuckborough vaults had was reflected in the Scarlet Book. The venerable Meriadoc and Peregrine, elders of 2 of the noblest families of the Shire, had close ties with Gondor and Rohan, so the lists of Brendonori, for example, contain many fragments of the history of Eriador and Rohan. Some of them were written down by Meriadoc himself, although his other works are better known. The Herbalist of the Shire and Chronology, which connect the calendar account of the Shire and Brill with the calendars of Doln, Gondor, and Rohan. Meriadoc is also the author of a small treatise, Ancient Concepts and Names of the Shire, containing interesting discussions about the relationship of the Hobbit language with the language of Rohan, and an explanation of the origin of special Shire words and names. The repository in Smilishchi contained sources that were perhaps less interesting for hobbits, but very valuable for great history. This is due to Peregrine. He, and later his heirs, collected many manuscripts compiled by the scribes of Gondor and containing copies or transcriptions of legends about the times of Elendil. Only here can one find information about the history of Numenor and the rise of Sauron. It is possible that it was in Smilishchi, with the help of Meriadoc's archives, that the first summary of the Tale of Years was carried out for. Despite the speculative nature of many dates, especially those related to the Second Age, the work deserves the closest attention. Perhaps in this work, Meriadoc used information obtained during frequent visits to Doln. After Elrond left, his sons and many high elves lived there for a long time. It is said that Celeborn also lived there after Galadriel left, but there is no mention of when he went to Silver Haven. With him, the last living memory of the most ancient days left Middle-earth. Thanks to everyone who listened. It was a cool story in the Tolkien universe. Be sure to share your thoughts and emotions in the comments. To be continued in the next video. See you later.